Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Lena. Welcome back to another video. So today I have another kind of quick video about recommendations for you. I've been reading a lot of books lately, like a lot of sequels, and I'm just like, oh, I prefer the first one better. So today we're going to talk about great first books. In this case, I believe that they are better than every other entry in the series, but still great first books in really good series. So let's just get started. The first one that I have here is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is a very popular opinion, even though I didn't hate Mallory, which is the second book that came out this year or last year, I don't recall. But in Bird Box we basically have this kind of innovation where you see this thing and you basically try to kill yourself. So it's a horror book, sci-fi horror. I love the first book. It's actually the first book that I ever listened to as an audiobook, so I have a great memory of it. But even though I didn't hate Mallory, it didn't have like the same feeling, honestly. Like, the kids were a very important part here and also in book 2, but still in book 2 they were a little bit dumb. So I much prefer book 1, honestly, but I'm pretty sure I'm of the popular opinion here. Then a pretty unpopular opinion. This is Shadow and Bone by Liv Verdugo. I'm pretty sure you know all about this one. This is YA fantasy. And honestly, I much prefer this first book over the entire Grishaverse. I know this is kind of like your typical YA book, but it's so much better structured than the rest. And I'm also a plot reader, so this one is actually kind of the only book that has like a plot in itself. Well, the Nikolai duology is pretty like plot-centered, but definitely Shadow and Bone. I mean, I just prefer it. Actually, I just prefer the whole trilogy over everything else. Even though Nikolai is my favorite character, like everyone else's, but I much prefer Shadow and Bone, honestly. I also really like the adaptation. The merge between the two storylines, amazing. Then this is the bind up, but we are going to talk about Blindsight, which is the first book, and the second book, what was called Echopraxia. That. So this is the bind up Firefall, but man, Blindsight was such a good book. This is a kind of first contact with aliens book, sci-fi book. Love it. Really philosophical, psychological horror, whatever you want to call it. The first one is just amazing. Also a little bit of horror there. The first one is so good. One of my favorite books of all time. Made it to my best books of last year. And then I read Echopraxia, and it was so different. It was so much less compared with the first book. Like, Blindsight is just so good. If you're into hard sci-fi, I highly recommend Blindsight. Like, it's going to blow up your mind. But don't be just like in a rush to get into Echopraxia. Maybe just because I had just read like Blindsight and then I went into Echopraxia, I just didn't like it as much. But definitely Blindsight is so much better. There's also vampires in this book, by the way. And I have here a couple of YA series. I don't know why, but I always prefer standalone YA books. Like, they're always so much better. So this is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is book 1 in the Truly Devious trilogy, which is now becoming a quartet. Why? I don't know. But this first book, Truly Devious, was so good. We basically follow Stevie. Was it Stevie? I think so. Stevie Bell. And she is basically invited to this prestigious like super academy to study true crime, which is super cool. And also a crime happened in this school several years ago. The wife and the daughter of the owner basically went missing, so she is trying to investigate that. It's just super cool, super entertaining. But the sequels just go downhill, honestly. Like the first book is just so good compared to the other ones. They're not bad by any means, like they're fine. But this first book is just so good and so engaging. Like, I still just think about this one. I'm kind of thinking about getting rid of the other two because I will only reread this one. But I kind of want to read like The Box in the Woods or something like that. The new book is called. But Truly Devious is so good, man. I'm pretty sure most of you will agree with me in this one. A Curse of Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kammerer. Even though I basically binge read this series, I still much prefer book 1. I feel like it's the most cohesive of them all. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's actually really good. Don't get me wrong, I'm not into retellings at all. and I was so surprised with this book. Like, it's super enjoyable. In the next books, we have some new characters, and some of the older ones just change and become like pretty much unbearable. I don't know. Also, the main character here, Harper, is just the best. It's one of those characters that you're just rooting for from page 1 till the last one. They're like so pure. But yeah, the next ones, I don't hate them, don't get me wrong. Don't hate them at all. And I read like the third one when it came out, like I bought it immediately. But this first book definitely holds, and it also could be a standalone. Like, if you take out like the epilogue, 100% could be a standalone. Then this is mostly because it's a really like good book. But this is Velocity Weapon by Megan E. O'Keefe. It's not like I much prefer book 1 over book 2, but I do prefer the mysterious aspect of this book. You're basically going to follow 2 timelines. One of them is Sanna, who is stranded 200 years in the future after the war ended, and she's trapped with this within this enemy ship with this super weird AI. And you're also going to follow her brother, and he's basically maneuvering through the war 200 years prior. But there's so much mysterious, like, mystery going on in this book compared to the second one. The second one feels more like an action-packed book. And even though I really like action in my books, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of slow-paced book and really mystery books. So I much prefer this first one. Well, it's not like I much prefer it, but I kind of low-key prefer it. And also, the reveal is so cool in this one. Like, it blew my mind compared to the second one, but still a super solid book. I highly recommend The Protectorate. It's a super underrated sci-fi series. Then another YA one, and the last one, I believe. Yes, this is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Hold on, hang on a second. Like, I love this trilogy. I love this trilogy, but there's something about this first book that is just so good. I really liked book 3. I read it last month, and it was like so sad. It was so heartbreaking. Like, oh my god, that book was sad. But this first book is just like so much more fun, lighthearted. Even though like it's very complex, it's super engaging. So I'm sticking with book 1. Basically, in this one, you're going to follow Pip, and she is on her last year at high school, but she is basically doing this paper about a murder that happened a year ago. She's basically trying to prove that the guy that was charged was actually framed. It's just super cool. Highly recommend this one. It's also mixed media, which is super great always. But yeah, I'm sticking with this one, okay? The other one is just too sad. Then we have here Master of Sorrows by Justin Cole. This is basically the book that inspired this video. I really like Master Artificer because it was great, grimdark. But I don't know, there's something about this book that I remember loving so much that it just... every time that I was reading the other one, I was just like, I just really like the first one, you know? So I don't know if maybe it's just me, but I definitely need to reread this one. This is basically a twist about the chosen one, but because maybe you're not chosen one to be the good guy, but to be the bad guy. It's just super cool. I really recommend the series, honestly. Extremely underrated. I've only seen this book pop up like 1 or 2 times, and one was on Instagram. So extremely underrated. But yeah, if you just really like twisted tropes, you're going to love this. It's a really more of a kind of epilogue to set up the whole world, but I don't know, I just really like this one compared to the second one. I don't know why, even though the second one is also really good. Then another recent read of mine, this is Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds. I read Redemption Arc this month, and I did prefer book 1 over book 2. I don't know why, but this one just has the right tropes for me. I just love this trope. The ancient civilization lost, and you're trying to figure out what the hell happened. I love it. It's a sci-fi book, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. But yeah, the second one was still good, but it didn't just like grab my attention as well as this first one. So for that, I'm just going to stay with Revelation Space for now. Then this is not exactly like the best one, but it's just really good. Like it's just like with A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. It's just like really good. This is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I love this series. It's one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I just love the Lycaonius trilogy. Like, it's so good and underrated. But this first book, it's just so filled with stuff. Like, the ending is just so good. This dude crafts so many good endings. Like, he's really good at it. It's just like every single time that you're finished, like, you're just like, okay, I need book 2 and I need book 3 right now. But I don't know why, this first book just felt so well done. Like, I don't know, there's something in here that I just much prefer over book 2 and 3. Like, book 2 is great. Book 3 has some flaws. I can acknowledge that. But I cry like a baby with the ending. So we're not going to comment on that. But this first book is just so solid. So many things happen here. So many different types of magic. You're basically going to follow mostly these 2 POVs, even though there are more. The first one is Devious. He is in this school because basically magic is forbidden in this world, and he is trying to pass his exam, and if he fails, basically he's going to be stripped of all his magic. But one day he discovers that he's actually an ogre, a race that used to rule in a very like strict manner, so they were taken down, but basically he's forced to flee. And we're also going to follow this unknown dude who wakes up in the middle of a massacred village. I love this book so much. It's so good. I have actually read this one 2 or 3 times. It's just so good. I feel like actually reading like a 4th time. It's just so good. And the last one that I have here is going to be The Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons, because I just read The House of Always, and I don't know why, but it didn't like stick the landing with me, that book. Even though it's a great soap opera, don't get me wrong, I still much prefer the way this book is told. It's very confusing, okay? Like, it's a very confusing book, don't get me wrong, because there's a lot of jump back and forth. We have Kieran's story. He is the main protagonist, and he is in prison, and we don't know why. He's telling us his life story, but his jailer is a mimic that can strip people of their memories. So she is also telling his life story. But with many different POVs. It's very confusing, but I just loved it so much. I don't know why, but the second book wasn't as good. The third one is great, has a great ending, but the fourth one had like a little bit of middle book syndrome to me. So I think that I'm sticking still with The Rune of Kings. Like, book 3 was great, but this is still my favorite one. Which is weird, but this first book was just so good, even though it almost felt like prologue, but it was so good. So yeah, those were basically my picks for best first book in a series. But do you have any recommendations? Do you have like that series that you loved the first book and the rest were just like, We could also include here, and we are going to include it, Annihilation. I didn't include it because I just pretend that the other 2 don't exist. Like, Authority and Acceptance? Lies. Those do not exist. Like, no. Annihilation is just so good on its own. Don't read the rest. Like, just keep Annihilation. But yeah, that last minute addition there. So, as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.